And so topic today is should my client form an entity or not? Also, just real quick, if you've seen that your client has formed an entity and shouldn't have, most states have, if they've been in business a year or less, you can cancel it. I've had a lot of people that'll incorporate and form a corporation when they just really should not have. I generally try to undo those as fast as possible to minimize the cost to the client, outside of if the reason they did it was for legal expenses. But out of who should not have done it, let's focus on who should do it, because it's a great revenue stream for clients, but it has to be set up properly. And also the clients have to be coached properly. For some reason, it gets out there from people's friends, bartenders, hairstylists, you name it, real estate agents, the people that love to give tax advice, that corporations and LLCs are somehow this magical thing that make everything deductible. And so, yeah, my friend has a corporation, so they write everything off. Yeah, you really got to counsel your clients that the tax laws are very similar for deductions between Schedule C and the entities. I mean, it doesn't magically make a bunch of stuff deductible. But what's the starting point for should my client form an entity, and what type of entity should they form? There are different kind of questionnaires available. There's a couple we use in the office here that I can't upload them right now, but I'll tinker them a hair and make them available for people. So I ask people questions. So they come in with a Schedule C. I have kind of a bottom line. If they're not profiting at least $60,000 and there's no legal concern, we definitely also don't want to dip into legal territory. So if the client has legal concerns about limited liability protection, I highly recommend, if you don't have one, have a business attorney that you work with. Find one, network with one that you can send your clients to that's not too expensive, but it's good to have that attorney in your hip pocket that can counsel them on the legal aspects and what corporate liability protection actually is against liability for products, things of that nature. And so really, when does it make sense? Either if they have a liability issue that they're looking for the corporate protection, either from somebody suing them, or it doesn't happen very often, but people will run up a ton of debt in the business. The reason why I say it's usually not an issue is any new business, the banks are going to make them sign a personal guarantee. So no bank's going to loan to a brand new entity, and so they make them sign a personal guarantee. So that sidesteps the corporate protection anyway. Also, I would be leery of any client that wants to form an S corp because he plans on bankrupting it in 3 years. It kind of sounds like he's up to something shady to begin with. So that being said, is if a new person is starting a business and they ask which entity way they should go, you really need to ask them what their projected revenue is, because if they're only going to be making 10 grand a year doing this thing, is it worth the cost to form an entity? And that's where to not overburden them. I have a lot of people that form entities that have no reason to. It just makes it more expensive for the client. They get frustrated, and if it's only making 10, 20 grand a year, they have a full-time job and they have no plans of taking it to the next level. What's the point? So don't try not to waste too much time on the guy that's making like 7 grand a year. That should he be an LLC or not? Or should he be, tell him to talk to an attorney, because there's really no tax advantage, and there's zero tax advantage on a single member LLC because it's same as Schedule C. That being said, if they plan on making more than 60 grand a year though, and the reason why I have the $60,000 cap is that's really the starting point for an S corp to be able to have reasonable salary and profit distribution to save enough in self-employment tax to justify the cost of the corporation itself. Because in setting it up for the clients is that they got to be aware of what they're doing. And that's why the attorney is important. People think they can just do everything online and be like, oh, LegalZoom will take care of me and it's not that expensive and everything else. But they really have no clue what they're doing. They don't do the operating agreements right. Nobody counsels them on minutes, setting up payroll, everything else. So I try to have everything up front as possible with my clients on what they're getting into, because they're not cheap and the client can't try to cheap out if they want to be a corporation, because our starting line is, okay, you're over 60 grand. We have a way you can incorporate and possibly save some tax dollars. You can save, maybe 5 to 6, maybe $8,000 in self-employment tax, depending on where the payroll and profits at. But this corporation is going to cost you $4,000 a year to run. So that's the reason why I have a higher profit limit, because you don't want to waste your time with corporations where they're splitting up 40 grand in profit between W-2 and profit to save 2 grand in self-employment tax to cover a $4,000 cost. That didn't help them. And it's a lot of extra work and it's a lot of extra everything else for not much tax savings. So I tell them up front, it's going to be expensive and you just have to be okay with that. But the tax savings that you're going to get from it are going to pay for that. So you'll come out ahead in the end. And they like that. And then that way also they don't bulk at the bill, because taking a Schedule C or someone that's self-employed, which they're generally very cost conscious, and they're also used to paying, $400 a year to get their taxes done. You're like, hey, you're now going to cost $4 grand. I try to explain it as much as possible so they're comfortable with that, but actually that they have in their mindset as well as they're not paying it. Basically, the government's paying it for them through the tax savings, because they have a hard time stomaching a $4,000 expense to do something when they've never paid more than $400 for it. So that being said, we tell them, okay, here's what you can save. We run a projection. We have, there's several different cost calculators that can actually just calculate and show you the cost savings that you can get from being a corporation. And so we show that to them, be like, okay, it'll save you $8 grand. Now you have to set up QuickBooks, because you got to have a profit and loss and a balance sheet at all times. So you got to set up QuickBooks Online. You got to set up payroll, which there's the fees there as well. Generally try to keep that as simple as possible in QuickBooks as well. It can all be automated now. And then explain the tax return process and extra costs there for the corporate return. And, make sure that they're aware that even if it does no business, still has to file. The term I use is that they're having a tax baby. It's got a heartbeat, it's got a social, it's got a file whether there's income or not. You have a bunch of extra requirements for it and everything else, and that's why they're way more expensive. And even if an S corp only grosses 40 grand, I'm still charging $1,500 for a corporate return. I don't care if there's $500 of income and 3 expenses. I still got to fill out a balance sheet. I still got to check all those boxes. You still got to put everything in. So I don't base any of my pricing on the size of the corporation, because even the little ones take a ton of time.
What I like about the Dream Team, and I think I've mentioned this a couple times with Glenn and Andy and a few other folks, is that what's nice about having this group is that you can have a mentoring type process. When I became involved with tax myself, I always thought it would be important to have mentoring, especially when I took over the actual tax practice itself. When I took over the tax practice, I felt it would have been nice to have someone who had similar experience with a business doing taxes and how to deal with clients and things like that, that would be helpful. In theory, the